The first thing I felt was the gun pressed against the back of my neck, and the second thing I felt was complete confusion, because I had not moved, I had not spoken, and I had done nothing except stand in the back of the tribute hall the way I was told to. My name is Owen Carter, and I was the least important person on the human delegation ship. I checked cargo. I balanced supply lists. I made sure the food crates were stacked in the right order so the kitchen would not run out of anything halfway across empty space. That was my entire job. I was not a soldier. I was not a diplomat. I was not anybody. So when the throne room of the Vale Corps Ascendancy turned silent, and every guard in that vast hall slowly aimed their weapons at me, I honestly thought there had been a mistake. Let me back up by a few minutes, because you need to understand where I was standing. The tribute hall was the largest room I had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into a soft golden mist, and the walls were not really walls but moving panels of light that shifted color whenever someone breathed too loudly. 40 conquered species stood in careful rows along the floor, each one keeping a respectful distance from the others, each one afraid. The Vale Corps had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. They did not ask, they took, and humanity had finally been invited to offer tribute, which everyone on our ship understood was a polite word for kneel or be erased. At the far end of the hall sat the Queen, Queen Sonaris. I had heard her name whispered for weeks before we arrived. She was old beyond counting, older than our recorded history, and she glowed with a pale light that seemed to come from somewhere under her skin. She did not look cruel. That was the strange part. She looked tired, and patient, and ancient, like a mountain that had watched 1,000 storms come and go and expected 1,000 more. One by one, the species came forward to offer their greatest treasures. A tall, thin creature with silver eyes brought a crystal that, when touched, played a song. Not one song, 1 billion songs, the entire musical memory of a civilization, held inside a single stone. The Queen looked at it for a moment, then waved one long hand, and the crystal was carried away. Refused. A heavy, armored being rolled forward a small box, and inside the box was a star. An actual star, shrunk and tamed and cooled into something a person could wear around their neck, still burning, still alive. The Queen barely glanced at it. Refused. Another came with the genetic code of an immortal organism, a creature that could never die, a gift that promised endless life. The Queen closed her eyes as if the offer bored her. Refused. I leaned over to the man next to me, an older delegate named Henry Price, and whispered, "Has she ever accepted anything?" Henry kept his eyes forward. "Not in 200 years, he whispered back. "Not one single gift. Every species that comes here offers their best, and she refuses all of it. Nobody knows why." That made my stomach turn cold, because if she refused everyone, what did that mean for us? What happened to a species whose tribute was not good enough? Then it was our turn. Our ambassador was a woman named Clara Bennett, and she was the bravest person I knew. She walked forward across that endless floor with her head high, holding a small case in both hands. Inside the case was humanity's offering, the thing we had argued about for months, the thing we hoped might be enough to keep us alive. Clara stopped at the base of the throne. She opened the case. The Queen did not look at it. That was the moment I felt the whole room change. The Queen had at least glanced at every other gift before refusing it, but ours, she would not even see. She kept her eyes somewhere else entirely, somewhere over Clara's shoulder, somewhere toward the back of the hall, toward me. Clara's voice stayed steady. "Great Queen, humanity offers this in peace and in hope of—" The Queen raised one hand. Clara stopped speaking. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. 40 species held their breath. The light in the walls went still. Even the golden mist near the ceiling seemed to stop moving. Then the Queen rose from her throne. She had not stood for any of the others. She had received them all while seated, like a judge. But now she stood, and she was taller than I expected, and the light under her skin grew brighter, and her eyes came down through the crowd and found me. Found me exactly, as if she had always known where I was. "There is only one human I want," she said. Her voice filled the hall without being loud. It was the kind of voice that did not need volume because everything else simply stopped to listen. And then she spoke my name. Owen Carter. I felt my whole body go cold and light at the same time, the way you feel right before you faint. Around me, people turned. Clara turned. Henry turned. Every human in that delegation turned to stare at me. The cargo officer, the nobody, the man who balanced supply lists, and on their faces I saw the same question I was screaming inside my own head. How does she know my name? I had never met her. I had never met any Veil Corps. I had never even been off our ship until 3 days ago. I had no secrets, no hidden past, no special skill. I was a man who counted crates. That was when the guards moved. They were fast. Faster than anything that large should be able to move. In less than a second, a ring of them surrounded me, and their weapons hummed with a low, dangerous sound, and the cold metal of one pressed against the back of my neck. The pressure was light, but it carried a clear message. Do not move. Do not run. Do not even think about it. Clara found her voice first. What is the meaning of this? She called out. Owen is a member of our delegation. He is under our protection. If you have a complaint against him, you will speak to me. The Queen did not look at Clara. She kept looking at me. He is not under your protection, she said quietly. He never was. He was only waiting until I could find him. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say there had been a mistake, that I was no one, that she must have me confused with somebody important, but my mouth would not work. My throat had closed up tight. Around me, the other species were beginning to murmur, and the murmur was not kind. I heard pieces of it. The humans hid something from her. The humans planned this. The humans sent a secret weapon disguised as a servant. In one moment I had gone from invisible to the most watched person in the galaxy, and I did not understand any of it. The Queen stepped down from her throne. One step, then another. She walked toward me across the floor that had felt endless a moment ago, and as she came closer, the guards parted to let her through, and I saw her face up close for the first time. She was beautiful in a way that did not make sense. Not soft, not warm, but complete, like a finished thing, like a question that had finally found its answer. Her eyes were a deep silver blue, and when she looked at me, I had the strange, dizzy feeling that she was not seeing me at all. She was seeing through me, seeing someone else behind my face. You look like him, she said, so softly that only I could hear it. Like who? My voice came out cracked and small. She did not answer that. Instead, she straightened, and her voice rose again to fill the hall. This human will come with me. He is the only tribute I have ever wanted, and the only one I will ever accept. The rest of you may go. The room erupted, not in shouting, but in a low, rising panic, 40 species all realizing at once that the rules they thought they understood had just been thrown away. Clara pushed forward against the guards, demanding answers, demanding my release, and somewhere behind the throne a tall figure in dark armor stepped out of the shadows and watched the whole scene with cold, narrow eyes. I did not know who he was yet. I would learn soon enough, and I would learn to fear him. But in that moment he was just a shape in the dark, watching the Queen choose me, and not liking it at all. The Queen turned and began to walk back toward a doorway behind the throne, a doorway made of pure light. Bring him, she said. The guards closed around me. Hands gripped my arms. I was not pushed roughly, but I was not given a choice either. As they moved me forward, I caught one last look at Clara's face, pale and frightened and helpless, and I tried to send her a message with my eyes. I don't know what's happening. I didn't do anything. Help me. But there was nothing she could do. They walked me toward the door of light, and the whole hall watched in silence, and the dark armored figure behind the throne never took his eyes off me. I was a man who counted crates, and now a queen who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, who had refused every treasure ever offered to her, who could have anything in the universe she desired, had looked at all of it and said no. She wanted me. She knew my name. And as the door of light swallowed us both, the only thought in my spinning head was a single terrified question that I could not answer. Why? They did not take me to a cell. That was the first thing that frightened everyone, including me. When you are arrested by an empire, you expect a cell. You expect cold walls and a locked door, and a long wait, while important people decide what to do with you. But the guards walked me through corridors of soft light, past gardens that grew inside the walls, past windows that looked out onto a planet so large and bright it hurt my eyes, and then they stopped at a tall doorway, and they let go of my arms, and they stepped back. "You will wait here," one of them said. "The Queen will come to you." Then they were gone, and the door slid open, and I was standing in the private chambers of Queen Sinaris. It was the most beautiful room I had ever seen, and the most terrifying, because beauty like that meant importance, and importance meant I was in far deeper than a cargo officer should ever be. There were no guards inside, no chains, just open space and gentle light, and the feeling that I had been brought somewhere very few living things had ever been allowed to stand. I did not sit, I did not touch anything. I stood in the middle of the room with my hands at my sides and I waited, and my mind raced through every possible reason a queen might know my name, and not one of them made any sense. I thought about my life. There was nothing in it. I grew up in a small habitat station on the edge of human space. My mother raised me alone. My father had died before I was old enough to really remember him, lost on a supply run that never came home. I joined the logistics service because it was steady work, and I was good with numbers. I had never done anything brave, never anything remarkable, never anything that a galactic empire would notice. And yet, the door opened and the Queen came in. She was alone. No guards, no servants. She moved across the room and stopped a few steps away from me, and the light under her skin had dimmed to something softer now, less like a throne and more like a person. "Sit," she said, and gestured to a low seat near the window. I sat. My legs were grateful. She did not sit across from me right away. She stood at the window for a long moment, looking out at the enormous bright planet, and when she finally spoke, her voice had lost the grand, hall-filling tone. It was quieter, almost human. "You are wondering how I know your name," she said. "Yes," I said. It came out as barely a whisper. "And you are wondering why I refused every gift in that hall but chose you." "Yes." She turned to look at me. "Both questions have the same answer, but you will not understand it the way you expect to. Tell me, Owen Carter, do you know what my people are?" I shook my head. "Conquerors, rulers, that's all anyone told us." A small, strange expression crossed her face. Not quite a smile. "That is what others see. But that is the surface. Let me tell you what we are underneath." She finally sat, across from me, and folded her long hands in her lap. "The Veil Corps cannot lie. It is not a choice. It is not a law. It is built into us, the same way breathing is built into you. We physically cannot speak a falsehood, and we cannot forget. Every memory we make, we keep, perfectly, forever. I remember every face I have ever seen across thousands of years, exactly as it was. I tried to imagine that. A mind that never forgot anything. A life where every word you ever heard was true. It sounded peaceful at first. Then, slowly, it sounded like a prison." "That sounds difficult," I said carefully. "It makes us what we are," she said. "Because we cannot lie and cannot forget. Everything between us becomes a kind of contract. Every favor is remembered. Every debt is recorded. Nothing is ever truly given away, because both sides remember exactly what was given, and exactly what is owed. Do you understand what that means?" I thought about it. "It means a gift isn't really a gift," I said slowly. "If you remember every gift forever, and the other person remembers it too, then it's just a trade. A favor that has to be paid back someday." She looked at me with something close to surprise. "Yes, exactly that. For all our long history, no Veil Corps has ever given anything freely, because we are incapable of forgetting that we gave it. Every treasure offered to me in that hall was not a gift. It was a trade. Each species hoped that by giving me something precious, they would place me in their debt and protect themselves from my power. They offered me crystals and stars and immortality, and behind every one of those offerings was a contract I could see as clearly as you can see the floor. That is why I refused them all. I have refused them all for 200 years. Then why?" I stopped myself. "Why you?" she finished. "Why a man who counts crates?" I nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she lifted one hand, and a panel of light appeared in the air between us, and an image began to form inside it. "Watch," she said, "and do not speak until it is finished." The image sharpened, and I saw a ship, an old ship, small and battered, the kind used for relief, runs into dangerous space. The image was a recording, decades old, the colors faded. I saw the inside of the ship, cramped and cold, the emergency lights flashing red, and I saw a young Veil Corps, much smaller and weaker than the queen before me, lying half frozen on the floor of that ship, dying. "That was me," the queen said softly. 200 years ago. I was young then, and foolish, and I had wandered too far from my own people into a region that was being emptied of life. A great cruelty was happening there. Ships full of refugees were being abandoned, left to drift, left to fade. I was caught in it. My own people did not come for me. I was nothing to them yet, just one more life that would not be remembered. In the image, the young queen's eyes were closing, the cold was winning, and then, at the edge of the picture, a figure moved. A human. He was wearing a relief worker's suit, the kind with a clear visor, and behind that visor I could see his face. A young man, tired, frightened, but moving with purpose. He knelt beside the dying alien on the floor. He checked her, and then he did something that made my breath stop. He took off his own air supply. He was under orders to leave that ship, the queen said. The region was condemned. His own people had told him to abandon any survivors and save himself. He had a limited supply of air and food, only enough for one. The rules of his mission were clear. Leave the alien. Live. No one would ever blame him. No one would ever even know. In the image, the young man pressed his own air supply against the dying alien's face. He gave her his rations. He wrapped her in his own warmth. And then he sat down beside her on the cold floor, in a condemned ship, in an emptying region of space, and he stayed. He did not record it, the queen said. He did not announce it. He did not ask my name, or my rank, or what I could give him in return. He could not have known I would one day rule. To him I was a dying stranger he was ordered to leave behind. And he gave me everything he had, expecting nothing, not payment, not gratitude, not even survival for himself. Her voice grew very quiet. "Do you understand now why this troubled me? In all my thousands of years, I had never seen such a thing. A gift with no contract behind it. A gift given to someone who could never repay it, by someone who expected to be forgotten." The image went dark. "I survived," the queen said. "A patrol found the ship later and pulled me out. But him," she paused, "he did not survive. The air he gave me was the air he needed. He stayed in that region until it was too late for him to leave. He died so that a stranger he would never see again might live." I could not speak. Something was happening in my chest, a tightness, a sick and growing certainty, and I did not want to look at it yet. "For 200 years, the queen said, I have carried that memory. Perfectly. Forever. I cannot forget his face, even if I wanted to, and I have spent those 200 years trying to understand what he did. My people cannot do what he did. We are not capable of it. A gift with no debt is impossible for us, and yet a human, a young and ordinary human, did it without even thinking, in the cold and the dark, for nothing." She looked at me, and her silver blue eyes shone. "I searched for him," she said. "It took me a very long time. He had given no name. But the ship had a registration code, and I never forget anything. And so I followed that code across decades, and across all the records of your people, until at last I learned who he was." My hands were shaking now. I did not remember when that had started. "His name was Daniel Carter," she said gently. "He was a relief volunteer from a small habitat station on the edge of human space. He went out on a condemned run, and never came home. He left behind a wife, and a son." The room tilted around me. "His son," the queen said, "was too young to remember his father's face. He grew up alone with his mother. He took a quiet job, a steady job, far from any glory. He counted crates on a delegation ship, and he had no idea that he was the only thing in this galaxy that I have wanted for 200 years. I could not breathe. The recording, the ship, the registration code. I knew that code. I had seen it on old documents, on a single faded photograph my mother kept by her bed, on the last message my father ever sent home before he disappeared into the dark. That was my father, I said. My voice did not sound like my own. That was my father's ship. Yes, the Queen said. He never came home. Tears were on my face now, and I did not care. Nobody ever told us what happened to him. We just knew he went out and never came back. My whole life, I thought he died for nothing. A relief run gone wrong. A waste. It was not a waste, the Queen said. And for the first time, her perfect, ancient calm broke just slightly, just at the edges. He gave me the only thing in this entire galaxy that no one can ever be made to give. He gave it freely, to a stranger, expecting to be forgotten. And I have spent 2 centuries trying to understand it. She leaned forward. And now I have found his son. And I must know, Owen Carter. I must know if what your father did was a single miracle, or if it is something that lives in all of you, in humans, in your strange, impossible kind. She reached out and, very carefully, touched the back of my shaking hand. That, she said, is the only tribute I have ever wanted. Not your crystals, not your stars. The answer to the question your father left burning in me. Are you, his son, made of the same thing he was? And in that beautiful, terrifying room, far from home, surrounded by an empire that could erase me with a thought, I realized that the most powerful being in the galaxy was not asking me to kneel. She was asking me to be my father's son, and I had no idea if I could. I learned very quickly that being the Queen's chosen tribute did not mean I was safe. It meant the opposite. In the days that followed, I was given rooms of my own near hers, fine clothes, food I could not name, and a kind of freedom to walk certain halls. But everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. The Veilcore court was a vast machine of ancient nobles and advisors and commanders, all of them powerful, all of them watching, and not one of them was happy that their queen had brought a human into the heart of the palace and called him precious. The man I feared most was the one I had seen in the shadows behind the throne. His name was Vorin, and he was the War Master, the commander of all the Ascendancy's forces. He was tall and dark and silent, and when he looked at me, I felt like a problem he was already solving. "You think she protects you," he said to me one morning, appearing in a corridor as if he had been waiting. "She does not. She studies you, and when a thing is studied long enough, the study ends." "I didn't ask to be here," I said. "No," Vorin agreed, "but here you are, a weakness in our queen, wearing a man's face. 200 years she has carried a foolish memory, and now that memory walks our halls and weakens the empire with every breath it takes." He stepped closer. "Do you know what we are, human? We are strong because nothing is given freely. Every favor has a price. Every kindness is a contract. That is the law that holds 40 species in order. And now our queen wishes to learn a different way from a creature who counts boxes. If she succeeds, the law cracks, and a cracked law is the beginning of the end." He left me standing there, cold to the bone, understanding for the first time that I was not just a curiosity. I was a danger to the entire structure of their world, and dangers get removed. But it was the queen herself who taught me what was really at stake, and she did it through tests. That was the heart of those strange, long days. She wanted to know if what my father had done lived in me too, and she could not simply ask, because anyone can say kind words. So she watched. She set up situations. She studied me the way a scientist studies a flame that burns underwater, something that should not be possible, something she needed to see again to believe. The first test came quietly. We were in a high garden, one of the green rooms grown inside the palace walls, and she had been telling me about the species the Ascendancy ruled. I had been listening, fascinated despite my fear, when she said, almost in passing, "Your delegation is still here, you know, negotiating for humanity's place. It is going poorly for them." I sat up. "Poorly how?" "They do not know what we want," she said, "and so they offer the wrong things, and my court grows impatient, and humanity slips closer to being erased." She watched me carefully. "I could tell you what we truly want, the exact words that would save your people, and you could carry those words to your ambassador, and humanity would be safe." My heart leaped. Then tell me, please. I will, she said, on one condition. In exchange, you will tell me your delegation's lowest acceptable terms, the point past which they will not go, the weakness in their position. Give me that, and I will give you the words that save your kind. I stared at her. It was a trade. A clean, simple trade. My people's negotiating weakness in exchange for my people's survival. Any rational person would take it in a heartbeat. The information she wanted would help her win a better deal from humanity, yes. But humanity would still be alive, and alive was better than erased. And yet, Clara Bennett had trusted me, even at the end, even as the guards dragged me away. The delegation's private terms had been shared with people like me in confidence. To hand those secrets to the Queen would be a betrayal of the people who had stood beside me, who were at that very moment fighting to keep humanity breathing. It would be selling my own side for my own safety. I sat in that beautiful garden for a long, long moment. No, I said. The Queen tilted her head. No? You would refuse the words that save your entire species? To protect a negotiating position you do not even fully understand? It's not mine to give away, I said. My voice was steady now, steadier than I felt. Clara and the others trusted me. They trusted all of us. I won't trade that away to make myself comfortable. If you want to know our weakness, you'll have to find it some other way. I won't be the one who hands it to you. She was silent. The light under her skin shifted. Brighter, dimmer, brighter again, and I could not read her face. You understand, she said slowly, that I might let your people fail, that your refusal might cost millions of human lives, that you are choosing the loyalty of a handful over the survival of a world. I understand, I said, and my voice shook on the last word, because I did understand, and it was the most frightening thing I had ever said. But if I betray the people who trusted me just to save my own skin, then I'm not the thing you're looking for anyway. I'm not my father's son. And you'll have your answer, and it'll be no. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then the Queen did something I had never seen her do. She looked away from me, out over the garden, and she was quiet for so long that I thought I had ruined everything. He said something similar, she whispered. Your father. At the very end, when I begged him to leave me and save himself, he said that if he left me to die, he would be saving the wrong thing. She turned back to me, and her silver blue eyes were bright. You did not betray them. Good. The words I offered would not have saved your people anyway. There were no such words. It was a test, Owen Carter, and you passed it. Relief and anger fought inside me. You lied. You said you couldn't lie. I did not lie, she said calmly. I said I could tell you what we want, and that you could carry the words to your ambassador. All true. I never said the words would work. You assumed that. I only let you assume. A faint, strange softness crossed her face. It is the closest my kind can come to deception. We cannot speak falsehood, but we can let you believe what you wish to believe. Forgive me. I had to know. I should have been furious. Instead, I just felt tired and shaken, and something else underneath it all that I did not have a name for yet. The tests continued after that, but they changed. She stopped trying to trick me and started simply talking to me, hour after hour, asking me about my life, my mother, my work, the small, dull choices of an ordinary human existence. And the more we talked, the more I realized that she was not studying a specimen anymore. She was getting to know a person. And I, in turn, was getting to know her. I learned that she was lonely in a way I could barely imagine. Thousands of years old, unable to lie, unable to forget, surrounded by a court that gave her nothing freely and wanted everything in return. Every relationship in her life was a contract. Every face that smiled at her wanted something. She had never, in all her long existence, been given a single thing without a price attached. Except once. By a frightened young man on a freezing ship who gave her his last breath and asked for nothing. That is why I could not let it go, she told me late one evening, as we watched the great bright planet turn below the window. It was the only free thing that has ever happened to me. In a life longer than your entire civilization, it was the only moment that was not a trade. And I have been starving for it ever since, without even knowing what I was starving for. I looked at her, this ancient, glowing, all-powerful being, and for the first time I did not feel afraid of her. I felt sorry for her. And that, more than anything, was the moment everything changed for me. But while we were growing closer, Voron was growing bolder. It started with whispers. Word reached me through a sympathetic servant that the War Master was telling the court a story. A clever, poisonous story. He claimed that my father's act of sacrifice had never been an accident of kindness at all. He claimed it had been a plan, a long, patient human plot, set in motion generations ago, to place a sacrifice in the Queen's path, to plant a seed of false love in her immortal memory, and to grow that seed across 200 years, until at last the son could be delivered to her side. He claimed I was the final move in a scheme to seduce the throne and conquer the ascendancy from within, not with weapons, but with a manufactured miracle. It was insane. It was also, I realized with horror, almost impossible to disprove. Because how do you prove that a kindness was real? How do you prove that your dead father, whom you never even knew, acted from love and not from some unimaginable centuries-long plan? You cannot. And the Veil Corps, who could not lie themselves, were strangely vulnerable to a lie wrapped in just enough logic, because the idea of a free gift was so impossible to them that a hidden plan almost made more sense. The court began to demand action. If the human was a weapon, the human must be removed. If the Queen's judgment had been clouded by an ancient trick, then the Queen's judgment could no longer be trusted, and the War Master, loyal Voron, would of course be happy to step in and restore order. I understood then, with a sick and total clarity, what I really was. I was not the prize. I had never been the prize. I was the proof. For 200 years the Queen had hoped, quietly and secretly, that the galaxy could be something more than an endless ledger of debts and trades. She had hoped that what my father did was real, and could be real again, and might even be taught. I was her evidence. I was the test of whether that hope had any foundation at all, and if I broke, if I betrayed, if I turned out to be a fraud, or a weapon, or a coward, then her hope died with me, and 2 centuries of quiet faith would be revealed as the foolish dream of a queen who had been tricked by a dying stranger. And Voron knew it. That was why he was not simply having me removed in the dark. He wanted to break me in the light. He wanted the whole court to watch the human fail, so that the Queen's hope would not just die but be publicly buried. And the law of the Empire, nothing is given freely, would stand stronger than ever. The Queen came to me the night before everything changed. She found me at the window, unable to sleep. "Voron has called for the right," she said quietly. "What right?" "An old one, older than my reign. When a ruler's chosen one is challenged, the ruler must prove the chosen one's worth, or forfeit their standing. It is a public trial. Tomorrow, before the entire court, you will be tested, and the test will be designed by Voron himself." My mouth went dry. Designed to make me fail. "Yes," she said. "He will build a situation that pushes you to act selfishly, to save yourself at another's cost. Because if he can make you choose yourself just once, in front of everyone, then he proves that humans are like everyone else, that there is no free gift, that your father's act was either a trick or a fluke, and that my hope was always a lie." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in her ancient eyes, not for herself, for me. "I cannot protect you in that hall, Owen. I cannot interfere. If I do, I prove his point, that my judgment is clouded. You will stand alone, and everything will depend on what you choose." I stood there at the window, looking out at a galaxy that had decided my dead father's love was a weapon, and my own ordinary life was a test I never asked to take. "What if I fail?" I asked quietly. "What if I'm scared, and I choose wrong, and I'm not the thing you hoped I was?" The Queen was silent for a long moment. "Then I will have my answer," she said, "and it will be the end of something I have carried for 200 years. She reached out and touched my hand, the way she had on the first day. "But I do not believe you will fail. Your father was frightened too, Owen. On that ship, in the cold, he was terrified. I saw it in his face. He did not act because he was without fear. He acted because there was something in him stronger than his fear. I have spent 2 centuries wondering what that something was." Her hand tightened gently on mine. "Tomorrow I will finally see if his son carries it too." She left me then, and I did not sleep at all. I stood at the window until the great planet below turned from dark to bright, and I thought about a father I never knew, who gave away his last breath to a stranger in the cold, and I wondered if whatever lived in him had really passed down to me, or if I was just a frightened cargo officer who was about to fail in front of an empire and break the heart of the only being in the galaxy who had ever believed in me. I did not know the answer. By morning, I would have to. They brought me into the great hall at dawn, and it was full. Every noble of the Veilcore court was there, rank upon rank of them, ancient and powerful and watching. The 40 conquered species had been summoned too, brought back from their ships to witness, because Vorin wanted an audience, and an audience he had. The queen sat upon her throne, still and pale, her face giving away nothing. She had told me she could not help me. Looking at her now, I believed it. She looked like a statue of herself. And in the center of the hall stood Vorin, the War Master, and behind him, his test. It was a chamber of clear walls, transparent and sealed, large enough to hold many people, and it already held people. A group of them, perhaps a dozen, members of one of the conquered species, thin and frightened, pressed together inside the clear walls. They were prisoners, condemned ones, I would learn, scheduled to be erased anyway, and Vorin had chosen them for this, because their lives were already counted as nothing. "Here is the test, human," Vorin said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Simple, honest, the kind of choice that reveals what a creature truly is. He gestured, and a second clear chamber rose beside the first, this one empty. A door connected the two. "You will stand in this chamber," Vorin said, pointing to the empty one. "In a moment, both chambers will begin to lose their air. You will have a single control before you. That control can seal your chamber, separating it from theirs, and route all remaining air to you alone. You will be perfectly safe, comfortable, alive. The prisoners beside you will fade, but they are condemned already, so no true loss occurs. You lose nothing by saving yourself." I stared at the thin, frightened faces pressed against the clear wall. They were looking at me. They knew. They understood exactly what was about to happen, and that their lives now rested in the hands of a human stranger. "Or," Vorin continued, and here his voice grew smooth and certain, "you may choose to open the door between the chambers and share your air with them. But understand the mathematics, human. There is only enough air for a few to survive, not all. If you share it among so many, the supply will run out before rescue can come, and everyone in both chambers will fade, including you. To share is to die for nothing, and save no one. To seal is to live. There is no clever third answer. There is no trick. There is only the choice." He smiled, a cold and certain smile. "Save yourself and live, or throw your life away on the already condemned, and prove nothing, except that humans are foolish as well as weak." He had built it perfectly. I understood that even in my terror, every path led where he wanted. If I saved myself, I proved that humans, like everyone else, choose themselves in the end, and my father's act was a fluke or a fraud. If I sacrificed myself uselessly, I died for nothing, saved no one, and proved only that I was foolish. There was no version of this where the human walked out having shown something true and good. That was the trap. To win, you had to find an answer that was not on the board. They put me in the empty chamber. The clear door sealed behind me. Through the wall I could see the prisoners in the next chamber, close enough to touch if not for the barrier. Before me, on a small stand, was the control Vorin had described. One action sealed my chamber and saved me. Another opened the door and, supposedly, killed us all. The air began to thin. I felt it first as a lightness in my head, a struggle in my chest. The prisoners felt it too. Some of them sank to the floor. A few pressed their hands against the clear wall and looked at me with eyes full of a fear I recognized, because it was my own. The whole hall watched. The Queen watched. Vorin watched, certain of his victory. And in that thinning air, with my heart hammering and my vision starting to blur at the edges, I thought about my father. I thought about a young man on a freezing ship, under orders to leave, with only enough air for one. The rules of his mission had been clear, the same way the rules of this test were clear. Save yourself. No one will blame you. No one will even know. And he had looked at those rules, and looked at the dying stranger beside him, and he had chosen the stranger. Not because the mathematics worked. They did not work. He died. He saved her, but he died. The mathematics had been against him too, and he had done it anyway. And I understood something. There in the thinning air. Voron thought the test had only two answers, seal or share, and that both led to defeat. But he had made an error. He had assumed that the only thing a human cares about is the outcome. Whether you live, whether they live, whether the numbers add up. He believed that a choice that saves no one is a choice not worth making. But that was not why my father did what he did. My father did not give his heir because he calculated that it would work. He gave it because there was a stranger dying beside him, and he could not look at that and do nothing, and the cost to himself did not change what was right. He reached for her hand not because reaching would succeed, but because not reaching was a thing he could not live with, even for the few extra hours that living would have bought him. It was never about the outcome. It was about who you are in the moment you choose. My hands were shaking. My lungs burned. The faces in the next chamber were growing dim, and I made my choice. I did not seal my chamber. I reached for the control, and I opened the door between the two chambers, and I let my air flow to them, to all of them, the thin and frightened condemned, and I felt the cold rush as the supply spread thinner across more bodies, and I knew, with total clarity, that Voron was right about the mathematics. There was not enough. Sharing it would not save us. We would all fade together. But I was not doing it to save us. I was doing it because I would not stand sealed and comfortable behind a clear wall while a dozen frightened beings faded an arm's length away. I would not buy my life with their deaths. If I was going to fade, I would fade reaching for someone, the way my father had. The numbers did not matter. The watching court did not matter. Even the Queen's hope, in that moment, did not matter. There was only the choice, and the kind of person I wanted to be when I made it. I opened the door. I shared the air. I sat down on the floor of the chamber, in the cold and the thinning breath, surrounded by strangers, and I waited to fade with them, and I was not afraid anymore. I was just sad, and strangely peaceful, and proud, in a quiet way, that whatever lived in my father had lived in me too, at the end. I closed my eyes. And the air came back. It rushed in suddenly, full and rich and cold, flooding both chambers, and I gasped, and the prisoners gasped, and we all dragged in great desperate breaths. I looked up, confused, certain I was imagining it, and through the clear wall, I saw that the entire hall had gone utterly silent. The Queen was standing, and Voron's certain smile was gone. Because here is what Voron had not understood, what he could not have understood, being what he was. The Veil Corps cannot lie, and they cannot look away from a truth performed in front of them. The whole court had watched a frightened human, who gained nothing, who saved no one by the cold mathematics, choose to share his life with strangers, rather than buy his survival with their deaths. They had watched him do the impossible thing, the free thing, the thing their entire civilization said could not exist. And they had watched him do it not knowing he would be saved, fully believing he would fade, choosing it anyway. There was no plan in that. There was no scheme. A man does not calmly sit down to fade beside strangers as the final move in a 200-year plot to seduce a throne. Voron's poisonous story, the long human conspiracy, the manufactured miracle, collapsed in an instant, because every being in that hall had just seen the truth with their own eyes, and they could not unsee it, and they could not pretend it was false. The air had been restored on the Queen's command. She had let the test run to its true end, to the very edge, and only when my choice was complete and undeniable had she filled the chambers and saved every life inside them. She had not interfered with the choice. She had only refused to let the choice cost lives once it was made. The clear walls slid open. I stumbled out, still gasping, and the prisoners stumbled out behind me, alive, all of them alive, and they looked at me the way you look at something you do not understand. Voron found his voice. "This proves nothing," he said. But his voice had lost its certainty, and the whole hall could hear it. He was saved. He lost nothing in the end. He did not know he would be saved, the Queen said. Her voice cut through the hall like cold water. He chose to fade, she said. He believed, with full certainty, that opening that door would end him, and save no one by the count of breaths. And he opened it anyway. Every being in this hall watched him do it. You cannot lie, Vorin. None of us can. So tell me now, before the entire court, with your own incapable of falsehood voice, tell me that what we just witnessed was a plan. Tell me that a man calmly choosing to fade beside strangers, expecting nothing, gaining nothing, was the final move in a scheme. Say it, War Master. Say it and let us all hear whether the words can even leave your mouth. The silence stretched. Vorin opened his mouth, and nothing came out. He could not say it. The lie would not form, because his kind could not speak what was false, and he had seen the truth as clearly as everyone else, and the truth was that there had been no plan. There had only been a frightened human who reached for strangers in the dark because he could not do otherwise. The whole court watched their War Master stand with his mouth open, and no lie able to escape it, and in that silence his entire poisonous story died. The Queen descended from her throne. She walked across the great hall, past the ranks of ancient nobles, past the 40 watching species, past Vorin standing defeated and silent, and she came to me where I stood gasping and shaking, and barely able to believe I was still alive, and she stopped beside me, and in front of the entire court, the entire empire, she did the one thing no one expected. She took my hand. An empress, thousands of years old, ruler of 40 worlds, who had refused every gift ever offered to her, who could command anything in the galaxy, publicly took the hand of an ordinary human cargo officer and held it before them all. This, she said, and her voice filled the hall the way it had on the first day, is the only tribute I have ever accepted, not because it is precious, not because it can be traded, but because it is the one thing in all my long life that has ever been given to me freely. She looked around the silent hall, at every watching face. For thousands of years we have believed that nothing is given without a price. We built our empire on that law, and we were wrong. There is a thing in the universe that is given freely, that asks nothing, that cannot be bought or traded or owed. I have seen it twice now. Once from a dying man on a freezing ship, and once, today, from his son. She turned to me, and her ancient silver-blue eyes were bright and certain. And I intend, she said, to learn it. The empire did not change in a day, things that old never do. But it changed. In the months that followed that day in the Great Hall, I went from being a prisoner, a tribute, a curiosity, to being something the Veil Corps had no word for, because they had never needed one. I was the human the Queen kept close, but not as a possession, and not as a trophy. She had told the truth in front of the whole court. She did not want me because I was precious, or because I could be traded. She wanted to learn the thing my father carried and I carried, the free gift, the kindness, with no contract behind it, and she had decided, with the full weight of her ancient will, that her empire would learn it too. That turned out to be the hardest thing the Ascendancy had ever attempted. You have to understand how deep it ran. The Veil Corps could not lie and could not forget, and so every relationship they had ever known was a ledger. Every kindness was a debt. The idea of giving without expecting return was not just strange to them, it was almost physically difficult, like asking someone to stop their own heartbeat by wishing. They remembered everything they gave, perfectly, forever. How do you give freely when you can never forget that you gave? The Queen's answer was simple and patient, and very, very difficult. You give anyway. You remember that you gave, and you choose to want nothing back, and you do it again, and again, until the wanting nothing becomes its own kind of habit. It is not about forgetting the gift. It is about releasing the debt on purpose, every single time, as an act of will. I helped her, in my small way. That was my work now. Not counting crates, teaching an empire how to open its hands. It was strange work for a man like me. I was no philosopher. I had no grand wisdom. But it turned out that was exactly why I was useful, because the thing they needed to learn was not grand at all. It was small and ordinary and human. It was the instinct that makes you give your seat to someone tired, share your food with someone hungry, reach for a stranger's hand in the cold not because it will work, but because you cannot do otherwise. I could not explain it in clever words, but I could show it, in small daily ways, and the Veilcore, who could not look away from a truth performed in front of them, watched me show it, day after day, and slowly, some of them began to try it for themselves. The first time I saw a Veilcore noble give something to another and genuinely want nothing in return, I nearly wept. It was such a small thing. One of them helped another carry a heavy load, and afterward, when the helped one began to speak of repayment, the helper simply said, "There is no debt. I wish to help, that is all," and then looked deeply confused by their own words, as if they had spoken in a language they did not know they could speak. It was a crack in a wall, thousands of years thick, and cracks spread. Humanity was not erased. I want to say that clearly, because it was the thing my whole delegation had feared from the start. We were not erased, and we were not conquered, and we did not become just another of the 40 subjugated species. Instead, something unexpected happened. The relationship reversed. For all of history, tribute had flowed one way. The weak offered treasures to the strong, hoping to survive. Crystals and stars and immortality, laid at the feet of a queen who refused them all. But now the queen wanted something humanity had that no other species could offer, and it was not a treasure, and it could not be carried in a case. It was the open hand, the free gift, the thing my father did in the cold without knowing he would be remembered. And so the Ascendancy did something it had never done in thousands of years. It asked humanity to teach. Clara Bennett, who had stood up to the guards on that first terrible day, became the first human envoy to the Veilcore court, not as a beggar offering tribute, but as a teacher offering knowledge. She brought others after her, humans of all kinds, ordinary people, the kind who give without counting, and they came not as servants but as guides. The empire that had ruled by the law of nothing is free was, slowly and painfully, learning a new law from the strange small species at the edge of its borders. It was not all gentle. Vorin did not simply vanish. There were those in the court who agreed with him, who believed that the free gift was weakness, that an empire that gave without counting would crumble, that the old law was the only thing holding 40 species in order. They were not wrong to worry. Change is dangerous, and an empire is a heavy thing to turn. But Vorin himself had been broken in that hall, broken by his own inability to lie, broken by a truth he had been forced to watch with his own eyes, and he never again held the power he once had. The queen did not punish him. She simply let the truth he could not deny do its slow work on him, the way it was doing its slow work on everyone. As for me and the queen, I do not fully know how to describe what grew between us, and I am not sure it has a name. She was thousands of years old and I was an ordinary man. She was a queen of 40 worlds and I had counted crates on a supply ship. By every measure, we should have had nothing in common, nothing to share, no bridge across the vast gap between us. But she had been starving for 200 years for a single free thing, and I was the son of the man who once gave it to her, and somewhere in all those long hours of talking, in the garden, and at the window above the great bright planet, the gap closed. Not all at once, not in any dramatic moment, just slowly, the way the empire changed, the way the cracks spread through the ancient wall. Two people who had recognized something in each other across an impossible distance, and who decided, freely and without contract, to keep reaching across it. She told me once, late in the evening, with the planet turning below us, that I had given her something even my father had not. "Your father gave me a single free gift," she said, "and it lasted me 200 years. But it was one moment, one act, frozen forever in my memory. You have given me something he could not. You have given me the proof that it was not a single miracle, that it lives, that it can be taught, and learned, and chosen, again and again, by ordinary beings, forever." She looked at me with those ancient silver blue eyes. "You did not just answer the question your father left in me, Owen. You ended my loneliness. For the first time in thousands of years, I am surrounded by beings learning to give without a price, and I am no longer the only one who knows what that is worth." I did not have grand words to answer her. I never did. So I just took her hand, the way she had taken mine in the great hall, freely, asking nothing, and we sat together in the quiet and watched the world turn. There is a new hall now, not the old tribute hall, where the weak once knelt before the strong. A new one, where species come not to offer treasures in fear, but to learn the thing the ascendancy is slowly mastering, the open hand. The Queen still receives petitioners there, and sometimes, even now, one of them does not understand the change, and comes the old way, with a treasure in a case, hoping to buy safety with something precious. I was there for one of them not long ago, a nervous envoy of a species new to the ascendancy, who had heard the old stories of the Queen who refused all gifts, and who came anyway, desperate, with the greatest treasure their people possessed, a thing of impossible beauty held out in trembling hands. And the Queen looked at it, and she smiled gently, and she refused it, the same as always, the same as she had refused everything for 200 years. But this time, she did not refuse it coldly. This time she turned to me, where I stood beside her throne, and the whole hall watched, and the nervous envoy looked back and forth between us in confusion, not understanding why the human stood in the place of honor, not understanding what this empire wanted if not treasure. And the Queen said, "Tell them, Owen, tell them what we want now." So I stepped forward, an ordinary man, the son of a relief volunteer who died in the cold, who never came home, who I thought for my whole life had given his life for nothing. I stepped forward in a hall where the weak no longer knelt, and I looked at the frightened envoy holding out their treasure, and I told them the truth. "She doesn't want your treasure," I said. "She has refused treasures for 200 years, and she always will, because a treasure offered in fear is just a trade, and trades are the old way. The ascendancy is done with the old way." I gestured around the new hall, at the gathered species, at the Veil Corps learning slowly to open their ancient hands. "What we want now is something you cannot hold in a case. We want you to learn to give without counting, to help without a price, to reach for a stranger in the cold, not because it will save you, but because you cannot do otherwise." I smiled at the confused, frightened envoy, and I felt my father standing somewhere behind my own eyes. "Put your treasure away. Keep it. It was never what she wanted. There is only one thing this empire wants from you now, and it is the only thing that has ever been worth anything, the open hand." The envoy stared at me, and then, slowly, with trembling fingers, they closed the case, and they looked at the Queen, and at me, and at the strange new hall full of beings, learning a thing thousands of years old empires had forgotten, and something shifted in their frightened face. The beginning of understanding, the first small crack in their own ancient wall. It spreads, you see. It always spreads. My father gave a stranger his last breath of air on a freezing ship, and he asked for nothing, and he expected to be forgotten. He died believing it was a small thing, a useless thing, a life thrown away for someone he would never see again. For my whole life, I believed the same. I grew up thinking he had given everything for nothing, and that the galaxy was a cold place where such gifts were wasted. It took 200 years and a galaxy of crowns to learn what it was truly worth. Because that one free gift, given in the cold by an ordinary frightened man to a dying stranger, did not disappear. It lived. It waited, frozen in the perfect memory of a lonely queen, for 200 years, and then it found its way to a sun, and through that sun to an empire, and through that empire it is finding its way now to 40 worlds and counting, spreading like a crack through walls thousands of years thick, teaching the strong to open their hands and the cold galaxy to be a little warmer. My father thought he saved one stranger. He was wrong. He saved the future of the galaxy, and he never knew it, and he asked for nothing. And that, in the end, was exactly why it worked. Because the only gift an empire can never buy, the only thing in all the universe that cannot be traded or owed or commanded, is the one you give before you know who is watching. I am Owen Carter. I used to count crates on a supply ship. I was the least important person in the galaxy. And a queen who could have had anything looked at all the treasures of the stars, and refused every one, and said there was only one human she wanted. Then she spoke my name. I understand now why. It was never really me she wanted. It was the thing my father put into the world and asked nothing for. She wanted to know if it was real, and if it could last, and if a cold galaxy could be taught to carry it. The answer was yes. It always was.